Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for attending Illinois Science and Technologies Coalition's 2022 Illinois Innovation Index, which is taking a deep dive into university entrepreneurship. My name is Colleen Negan, and I'm the president and CEO. For those of you, first of all, I would love to thank all of our universities that have assisted us, who are members, who are great supporters of ours through this, our 32-year history. And I'd also like to present thank our presenting sponsor, USG. For those of you who don't know the Illinois Science and Technology Coalition, we were started by the state 30 years ago under DCEO, and we have been measuring, connecting, and advocating for the state's innovation economy for over 30 years. We do all of our work through our 4 pillars: IDEA, innovation, data, education, and advocacy. And as you can see, some of the programs that we're really well known for, of course, are our data insights, our innovation indexes, our Spark and Catalyst newsletters, which we'll go through, but also a lot of our programming on STEM education, K through 12, STEM Challenge, Mentor Matching Engine, the 6x3 project, and teacher externships. On the innovation side, our Venture Engine pilot just completed its first year, and Toby will be discussing it later, but we're really proud of the work we've done this last year as a startup and corporate connection platform and program that has just expanded wildly throughout the state. We have a lot of venture capital that's interested, and the Illinois State's treasurer came on as a sponsor this year. Our partners in that work are WBC, World Business Chicago, and TechNexus Venture Collaborative, and we're really excited that they're partners of ours. Next slide, please. As you can see, if you are not subscribed to our publications, please do so. You can find us at istcoalition.org. I should know that website. But some of our publications are our weekly Spark, our yearly Researchers to Know, which we just celebrated our 5th release, and hopefully some of the researchers are here with us today. Our State of Innovation podcast. We do Catalyst Conversations, Index Insights, which are deeper dives into topics throughout the state, and of course, our Illinois Innovation Index, which we do in 3 parts. And as you can see, these are those 3. University entrepreneurship, which we will be speaking about today. Research and development, many of you might have been here for our March release. And our talent, supply and demand, STEM talent, will be coming out early in the year. As you can see, we've gone through a total rebranding as well. And so we'll be excited to put that icon up at our next event. And without further ado, Fiona McEntee, not only a colleague, but a friend. We've worked together through ISTC and individually outside of work, but mainly on immigration entrepreneurship. As you'll see later in our reporting, it used to be last year's reporting showed that 35% of university startups were led by at least one immigrant founder. That has gone up to 42%. But the United States is one of the only countries that doesn't have a clear pathway for those entrepreneurs to stay. Fiona has been, just a warrior in this work. She's the founding and managing attorney of McEntee Law Group, an award-winning immigration lawyer. You've probably seen her on MSN, CNBC. She's a national media commentator and an author of One American Dream, which is a children's book for immigration, which my grandchildren love. So I would love to bring Fiona to the screen. And thanks, Fiona, for being here today. Elle, give us a moment, because I think Kate is trying to get you. There you go.
Okay, wow, spotlight. Thank you so much, Colleen, for your really kind words, but also for your friendship and collaboration over the years. I'm just really honored to be here today with you all. Thanks to Colleen and for the entire team for inviting me. I'm in amazing company, as you'll see, with our panelists that are coming on later. So just by way of background, as Colleen mentioned, I'm an immigration lawyer and I have been practicing as an immigration attorney for the past 15 years. So my entire career as an attorney has been practicing as an immigration lawyer. I do a lot of work in relation to startup immigration. And that really encompasses kind of two different facets. It's those startups that are born in the US with perhaps an immigrant co-founder or employee in a key leadership role, and also startups that are founded outside the US and are looking to expand in. So I help people in different capacities, but do a lot of work in relation to startup immigration. I know we're all really excited to read the Illinois Innovation Index 2022 University Entrepreneurship Report. And also I'm excited to learn about the Venture Engine program as well, the pilot program, to hear more about that. And really, like, talking about universities, entrepreneurship in universities is something that is near and dear to my heart on both a personal level and a professional level too. Personally, you may have noticed my accent. I was not born in the US. I came here as an international student initially over 20 years ago for 1 year to study at DePaul's College of Law. I completed that program, went back to Ireland to finish my bachelor's in law, and came out to do my JD at Chicago Kent, which is affiliated with Illinois Tech University, a fabulous university here in Illinois. And so that's my personal connection to international students. And then professionally, I have been so honored to have worked with thousands of international students in universities all across Illinois and the US in the course of my 15 years of practice. I've tried to help them as they navigate the immigration system in a way to hopefully have a chance at pursuing their American dream. And this can be really challenging because, as Colleen mentioned, the US does not have a startup visa. We stand in contrast to a lot of our international peers, and it's a real shame. You may know that Congress is the body that is tasked with creating laws here in America. And 1990 was really the last time that Congress revamped the US immigration law. Now, policy has changed. Obviously, we've seen that with different administrations, the policy can change, but the underlying law has not changed. And it's over 30 years old. Now, throughout the course of those 30 years, there have been attempts, bipartisan attempts, to create a startup visa, but as of yet, we do not have one. So keep this in mind as I share some of the things that I'm going to say, that we do not have a startup visa here in the US. And as I was kind of thinking about today's keynote address and what I would discuss, there were two words that came to mind to me. And those words are opportunity and community. And I think both of these words have both a personal and a professional they resonate with me on both of those levels. And personally, I mentioned I've obviously came to the US and I've had so many opportunities in law that I don't think I would have had outside the US. Some of them include creating my own firm, having a front row seat to these incredible immigration stories and meeting the most wonderful, inspiring immigrants. Doing a lot of advocacy at the national level for a startup visa, including being asked to submit written testimony to a congressional hearing about why we need a startup visa. I recently got back from DC, where I had the opportunity, which is a career high for me, to meet with Senator Durbin's team in the hearing room for the Senate Judiciary Committee. And so in that room, where so many things happened, to get the opportunity to discuss why we need a startup visa. And I think the opportunities that I've had have been because of the community that has been supporting me, like other immigration lawyers, advocates, the likes of obviously Colleen and the Illinois Science and Technology Coalition, the startup community in Chicago, the universities, like the huge ecosystem that just gets around and supports everybody. That community has enabled me to take advantage of these opportunities. And I try to see how I can leverage the opportunities that I have been given to try to make the system a bit more accessible for other immigrants. And I think when we look at these two themes of opportunity and community, we can really see how they tie into the innovation index that we're going to see today. The data contained in the report just illustrates the huge opportunities that these entrepreneurs in our universities have, not just for themselves, but the opportunities to create a better state, a better country, and we will be the beneficiaries of these opportunities. And us as a community can rally together and we can give them the support that they need. And this will benefit us too. And we know this because immigrants always give way more than they take from any country. Some data to support that shows that immigrants we only make up about 17% of the workforce in the US. But notwithstanding that, over 55% of the unicorns in the US were started by an immigrant. And if you add in the children of immigrants, that percentage rises up to 64%. A statistic that I love is that 1/4 of these unicorns, or these startups that are valued at $1 billion or more, 1/4 of them were started by somebody who came as an international student. And they have created so many jobs. You know, there's very diverse founders from lots of different countries. Immigrant women are very well represented. And when you look at all this data, you would think that our system would openly embrace these immigrant entrepreneurs. But unfortunately, that is not the case. And the data shows us that these immigrant entrepreneurs have been able to succeed in spite of the system, really. They've come through other ways, maybe through the refugee or the family-based immigration system, or this traditional employer-sponsored route, and maybe later started their startups. And it doesn't have to be this way. And we're really losing out as a country. Our losses, other countries' gains. You know, lots of other countries have startup visas. Canada, our neighbor to the north, they have a fantastic startup visa program that last year received 3 times the amount of applicants that it had received in previous years. And I'm sure that some of those applicants would have started their startup in the US. They may have even graduated as a foreign student here and weren't able to navigate the system. So they moved to Canada where they could avail of the startup visa program. And, you know, we have so many examples of amazing immigrant founded startups. Some of them are here today, I think, and we'll be speaking later, but there's one that always comes to mind for me. They're clients and friends of mine, and that is Mert Aziri, who is the co-founder of SwipeSense. SwipeSense was started by Mert and his co-founder Yuri, an American student in Northwestern University. They have the most incredible story of success. They ultimately were acquired, but their mission was to help prevent the spread of hospital-acquired infections across the US, and they expanded to other services. But I mean, just thinking of them as an example, we know that we're safer because of immigrants like Mert and his co-founder Yuri working together to prevent the spread of these hospital-acquired infections. And I know that there are Merts and Yuris in campuses around Illinois today. And we know that because we can look at this index and we can see that with support, some of these founders can turn into the Merts and Yuris. One thing that I noticed in the index was that over 15% of these startups are in biomedical sector. There's a record number of women-founded startups here, which is fantastic. And startups that have diverse founders, they're more likely to remain active and attract funding than other startups. So this is a no-brainer to support these. Colleen also gave the data, which is just not really blowing my mind, but it's kind of solidifying everything that I am seeing. But now we have data to support it, that startups, university-supported startups that have at least one immigrant entrepreneur, it's around 42%. And that's raised than the previous data, which I think was in the 30s. And this is the highest percent of immigrant entrepreneurial activity that's been recorded over the past decade. So I am just so excited about the future. I'm excited when I see this data. I'm excited about the opportunities that we all have. I am honored to be part of such an amazing community. A lot of you are here today. And I know that we can all work together to enable these immigrant entrepreneurs, these American entrepreneurs, to really drive this forward. And I cannot wait for the future. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Fiona, for being with us here today and all the insights that you have and all the great work that you've done on immigration entrepreneurship. And today, actually, you know, I've said it before, we're really excited to present this year's index. Even during COVID, you know, innovation did not stop. I keep saying that every time we have one of these events, it just accelerates. And I'm really proud to have Austin Green with us here today. Austin is our lead data intern, but he's also been with us for a year and a half. He's deeply embedded in this work. He's done a great job putting the R&D index together, and now this one. Can't wait for our STEM talent report that comes out early next year. But Austin, glad you're here, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Colleen. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. This morning, we are releasing the 2022 University Entrepreneurship Report, which is one part of our three-part index series, as Colleen mentioned. I'd also like to extend a massive thank you to our presenting sponsor for this index release, the USG Corporation. My name is Austin, as Colleen mentioned, and I am an intern with the Illinois Science and Technology Coalition through the University of Illinois Springfield's Graduate Public Service Internship Program. Next slide, please. So as Colleen mentioned, during the pandemic, innovation absolutely did not stop. However, the headline in this year's University Entrepreneurship Report is that there is 760 university-supported startups that were founded on Illinois campuses over the past 5 academic years. This does represent a fall of nearly 200 startups from our previous University Entrepreneurship Index in 2020. Sorry to start off on a sour note, but of these startups, more than 3 out of 4 remain active, which means that our activity levels are at a higher rate than previous years. And among those active startups, 80% of them remain in Illinois, according to our survey. Next slide, please. While this volume of startup activity is less than what we were expecting for academic years 2018 through 2022, we can see that startup creation has still continued. The problem is that there has been an equal impact between non-tech transfer startups and tech transfer startups. So non-tech transfer startups are those startups at universities that do not choose to license university intellectual property. Meanwhile, tech transfer startups are those that do license that intellectual property. And this is how we classify those 2 different types of startups in our survey. Both types saw about an equal impact from the pandemic on the decrease in the number of startups over that time span. Next slide, please. By industry, biotech continues to lead by most metrics, which is a continuing story from previous University Entrepreneurship Index. Biotech startups account for about 15% of all startups in the university systems. IT is just behind biotech, and in fact, software and IT came in at 114 startups in this past collection, with biotech coming in at 115. So only one difference there. So possibly in future years, we could see software and IT eclipse biotech as the most popular type of startup sector. Health-related startups, which are a combination of our biotech startups and our healthcare startups, make up just over 1/4 of the ecosystem. And in this year's report, we're seeing a more equal distribution of startups across multiple sectors, especially whenever you're looking past those top 3 sectors. There's been a much more equal distribution for startups in the arts and entertainment and recreation fields, finance and insurance, accommodations and food services. And we'll move back to some of the improvements in other sectors here in just a minute. Next slide, please. As a economic development association, ISTC is extremely excited about this slide in particular. Job creation in startups has been continued, and despite the impact of the pandemic, there's still been 2,300 new jobs formed over the past 5 years due to the impact of these small businesses. Of these jobs, our survey estimates that about 1,680 remain active, and of those active jobs, 1,272 remain in Illinois. While this 2,300 jobs creation number is a significant decrease from the 2020 University Entrepreneurship Index, we expect this lull will reverse in the coming years as the recovery from the pandemic continues. Next slide, please. This graphic displays some of the total fundraising numbers that we've captured in our survey. As you can see, $940 million has been raised by university-supported startups across the state of Illinois between 2018 and 2022. This does represent a fall of about 450 million from our previous index in 2020. However, we are seeing that the amount of funding coming from venture capital and other sources is continuing to raise in the composition of the total total funding. And as you can see in those pie charts below, tech transfer startups make up about 3/4 of the total funding that university supported startups are able to generate. Funding by category of startup is something that we'll talk about in a little bit later, but as you can see here, non-tech transfer startups have seen their funding levels fall quite a bit more in comparison to those tech transfer startups over the past 3 years, and we'll get into why that might be in the looking forward slide. Next slide, please. As we can see here, this is a breakdown of funding levels by sector. And again, biotech leads the way here because of the cost-intensive nature of some of the early exploration around biomedical technologies and the startups surrounding those technologies. There is a lot more fundraising generated for those companies in that area. In fact, there is about $266 million in fundraising for every other sector combined outside of biomedical technology. And as you can see, biomed still makes up about 2/3 of all funding. Another exciting thing that ISTC is extremely excited to report on is that fintech funding for startups in that sector eclipsed $100 million for the first time in our survey's history. Direct university funding is that funding that comes from pitch and startup competitions outside of the venture capital world, and they come directly from university funds and startup funds and incubator funds that go directly to some of these startups. $9.8 million in direct university funding was generated between 2018 and 2022. And we've found that of that $9.8 million that have been generated, $137 million has come on an additional fundraising. So for those startups that have been able to acquire direct university funding, $137 million has come in from other sources in the aftermath of that funding. We know that direct university funding helps small businesses complete a prototype, explore target markets, and position themselves for future funding. And this graphic displays that. In fact, there's a ratio of 14-to-1 in startup funding that comes from outside sources in the aftermath of the direct university funding. Next slide, please. This slide displays some information regarding participants and non-participants in two federal programs that are intended to support small businesses in Illinois. The I-Corps program, the NSF I-Corps program, is one way that startups are able to kind of collaborate and start working on a minimum viable product. Of the 91 university supported startups that participated in I-Corps, just about 85.7% of them remain active. In fact, and then SBIR and STTR are two programs under the America's Seed Fund that are grants that are given out to small businesses that are able to prove the impact of their research on a viable product. And of those that have received SBIR or STTR grants, 100% remain active, according to our survey of those that have received them over the last 5 years. And of those that remain active, 81.5% remain active in Illinois. Additionally, of all of those startups that participated in both programs, we're seeing all of them remaining active in the current year, and about 90% of those remain active in Illinois as well. ISTC continues to be a supporter of America's Seed Fund, the parent legislation that led to the SBIR STTR programs, and we were thrilled to see the program reauthorized just a few short months ago. Next slide, please. Perhaps the most exciting thing to report from the 2022 University Entrepreneurship Index is that the diversity of the startup founders on Illinois campuses has increased significantly. University entrepreneurship centers are stepping up to the plate to improve representation in entrepreneurship. And we are able to see that in the data. 37% of university startups feature a woman as a founder or a co-founder, according to our survey, and 43% of university-supported startups feature a foreign-born founder or co-founder. Both of these are higher than previous totals in our other indexes, and we're really excited about that. That is representative of the efforts of our university support staff, and we are really trying to incentivize those foreign-born founders to continue to stay in Illinois. As Fiona mentioned, the creation of a startup visa would really assist in that. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few slides. Next slide, please. This is the only bit of data in the report itself that does not come from our university entrepreneurship survey. This tech transfer metrics do come from the Association of University Technology Managers. And as you can see, the focus in Illinois has been on quality over quantity. Licenses and options agreements are those agreements that allow universities to authorize startup founders to use their intellectual property. And 246 of those licenses have been executed in 2020 with universities. And over the past 5 years, those types of license and option agreements have generated $1.34 billion in licensing revenue, which over that 5-year span ranks Illinois first, ahead of many other competitor states. And additionally, this is led primarily by some very large jackpot licenses within a couple of our universities. And we're hopefully going to continue generating that licensing revenue in the future, due to the impact that that revenue has on university ecosystems. Additionally, and as you can see on the left side of this graphic, invention disclosures rank Illinois 10th at 808 invention disclosures, and then patents rank Illinois in 5th at 348. And then the graphic at the lower level there displays some of our growth rates compared to the national average. As you can see, we are outpacing the national average in patent acquisition, while we are about on average with license and option agreements in 2020. All of this data presents some strengths and challenges for the entrepreneurship community here in Illinois. Here are some of the highlights and lowlights from this year's report. We've touched on a number of the strengths, but the most obvious among them is that startup activity among diverse founders has increased significantly. Foreign-born founders went from 39% of our total startups in 2020 to 43%. And then women-founded startups went from 33% in the 2020 University Entrepreneurship Index to 37% this year. Both groups of founders are more likely to remain active and attract follow-on funding than are our general population of startups. New analysis this year shows just how catalytic early stage funding provided by universities is, with small investments from that direct university source leading to about 14-to-1 ratio in follow-on funding in the aftermath. Financial technology startups increased their funding levels past benchmarks of 100 million for the first time. And that's something that we hope to continue seeing in the future, and hopefully it will show returns for startup founders in that sector. And then on the more negative side, we did see a pretty significant drop for non-tech transfer startup funding, which we do attribute to the impact of the pandemic on on-the-ground learning and on the opportunity for entrepreneurs to collaborate with both their researchers on campus, but also other startup founders as well. Though the universities have done an incredible job at continuing these pinch competitions and allowing young entrepreneurs the opportunity, we do think that the lack of on-the-ground access did impact non-tech transfer startup funding. Additionally, and on the same type of conversation around the pandemic, there was an overall drop in the number of startups of about 200, which was primarily isolated to the years of the pandemic itself. That's when we saw the most significant amounts of that drop. And then lastly, tech transfer output can, lastly, the several sectors that were outside of biotech did see a decrease in fundraising compared to years prior. This, of course, is not exclusive to a few different sectors. There was a few sectors that increased their funding, but year over year, we see fluctuations in these sectors, and we saw several sectors drop compared to years prior. Next slide, please. Looking forward, there are several steps that Illinois can use to help capitalize on the tremendous achievements of many startups within our university ecosystem. One of the things that has been mentioned, I think by Colleen in our opening, is that the SBIR Matching Funds Program was allotted $5 million by the state this year, which is for fiscal year 2023, which is something that we're extremely excited about as being one of the primary movers for the SBIR Matching Funds Program. Additionally, we are really excited that the University Industry Innovation Vouchers Program is getting a kickstart by the governor and allowing startups and other businesses to leverage university R&D resources for mutual benefit. And then lastly, one thing that we don't have a check mark on is something that we can move forward with in the future, and Fiona talked about this, is we should work towards enacting a startup visa so international entrepreneurs can stay in the state and continue to grow job creation. Our current system leaves new jobs on the table by forcing too many foreign-born founders to leave or abandon their venture. And given our data that suggests that 4 out of 10 student and faculty founders are foreign-born, immigration reform that allows for the continuing activity of these founders is extremely important. And Illinois Science and Technology Coalition will continue to be an advocate for the creation of this startup visa. Next slide, please. I would love to extend a very grateful thank you to our 11 amazing university partners, or 12 amazing university partners across the state, and also highlight those 3 awesome data partners that we have on the right side there. Autumn is the Association of University Technology Managers, and they help us collect that information on tech transfer that you saw a few slides ago. And additionally, Crunchbase and PitchBook are used as the kind of external resources for providing that funding information, and they provide a lot of supplementary context on what type of funding levels these various startups are at. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Colleen to introduce Toby.
Thank you so much, Austin. That was great. And again, we appreciate all the hard work that you've put into this. And I hope this was informative for everyone. The report will be on our website later today, and the video of the recording of this session. So again, thank you for being here. And Austin, thank you for presenting. A perfect segue over to Toby Oladejo, who is our Innovation Program Coordinator here at ISTC. It's a perfect time for us to share some insights that we have on our Venture Engine program. Venture Engine started as a pilot. We used to do the Illinois Corporate Startup Challenge years ago and had a lot of great success out of that program, which Toby will talk about. But we wanted to reimagine that based on our equity framework and really focusing on Illinois startups coming out of our universities and our partners throughout the state. So with that, Toby, I'd love you to come on screen and introduce yourself and the assessment of Venture Engine.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Colleen. And of course, thank you, Austin, for sharing that tremendous impact over the last few years here. Hi, everyone. My name is Toby Oladejo. I'm the, as Colleen mentioned, program coordinator here at ISTC, and I'm excited to share some of the findings and impact that we've captured over the last 12 months through Venture Engine. Next slide. And of course, that work is not is done alongside our partners at World Business Chicago, as well as Tech Nexus Venture Collaborative, and is also sponsored by the Illinois Growth and Innovation Fund, who came on earlier this year. Super grateful for these amazing partners in this work. So the question as to how Venture Engine got here, we used to do something here at ISTC called the Corporate Startup Challenge. And this was a very successful, award-winning basically program that we would do about 2 times a year. It was very elaborate. And essentially this was like a 2-time-a-year event where startups were referred from across the state and across affinity group, demographic, and sector, and were able to pitch in front of different corporations and their investment and innovation arms. And what we found off the back of these 4 different cohorts is a lot of great relationships and partnerships that were able to be secured. So we saw everything from pilot deals to sales contracts, mentorship and resource sharing, and so much more. One of the more famous ones that we got off the back of those 4 cohorts was Sprout Social, who was able to actually be paired with Hyatt Hotels for a 175 hotel pilot deal. And a few years later, we kind of saw that as almost like a building block and a stepping stone to them eventually IPOing. So in view of the success that the Corporate Startup Challenge had, we reimagined Venture Engine to become something that was more on a daily occurrence, a more weekly occurrence, as opposed to something that happened 2 times a year. So in order to understand the need here, we saw the gap, right, in regards to not only what corporations were looking for, but what founders were looking for as well. And in our surveys to our corporations, we found that 85% of our respondents mentioned that collaborations and connectivity with entrepreneurs would drive success for their organizations in the future. And on the flip side, we saw that 85% of our founders in our startup community also mentioned that corporate partnership was a top priority when they thought about the roadway for their companies as well. So this was like the perfect opportunity to bring these 2 worlds together. So in starting in September of last year, we have just really skyrocketed ever since then. At the moment, we're on track to have about 175 startups, but we've onboarded about 30 different startups per quarter. And I'll get into the types of founders that we serve and the breakdown of what that looks like. At the moment, when you look at the revenue breakdown and the stages, we primarily work with pre-seed to Series A startups. And as you see here, 40% of those startups have earned $500,000 or less, while 34% of Venture Engine startups have yet to earn revenue, either because maybe they're fundraising at the moment, bootstrapping, but are certainly on their way to doing so. And we're really looking forward to 2023, increasing that number of more founders in the early revenue stage. As Colleen has mentioned earlier, equity was one of the major points of emphasis when we left, the time of the Corporate Startup Challenge into Venture Engine. And for that reason, we really focused on how to position our founders from these overlooked communities in front of opportunities that could help them scale their business. So as you see here, 41% of our founders within Venture Engine come from an underrepresented demographic. As it relates to corporate and VC engagement, these are some great numbers here, because initially when we started Venture Engine, we saw a lot of, the bread and butter, which is corporations, and our partners reflected that as well. But over the course of the year, we've really gotten a lot more VC engagement as well. And we're really excited to continue doing active work with these organizations in helping our founders grow. And when we, now think about the work that is created in not only these relationships, but the connections that come afterwards, this happens through not only our referrals and the ways that we introduce directly founders to these corporations, but also through our different showcases and workshops. And as you see here, we have, over the course of the year, 34 active corporate start connections. And this goes across business development, capital investment and funding, lab space, client relationships, and sales contracts. And we're really in 2023 looking to see these relationships inked into deeper partnerships that lead to mutually beneficial relationships on both sides. And as mentioned, one of the biggest things that we really expanded in the course of our pilot year was not just the direct relationships in our introductions, but also the programming around it. So over the course of the year, we have done 7 different startup pitch showcases, and this goes across sectors like manufacturing, ag tech, and so much more. And of those 50 startup pitches that we held in our pilot, 32% came from an underrepresented founder. And of the 34 connections mentioned earlier that were made in the pilot, 50% were with an underrepresented founder. So as mentioned, we really just want to make sure that we are doing our due diligence in making sure that founders who are overlooked are positioned for success. And one of the coolest things that I've had the privilege of being able to be a part of and just see within our ecosystem is just the dynamic nature of collaboration between founders. Initially, we came into this thinking about startup corporate connectivity, but what we have found is that this has also been a value add to our founders in actually recognizing how their startup technology or startup services could impact that of others. And as you see here, Equipped is a DEI-focused company, and they were actually able to land a 6-month sales contract with Aqua Oso and Clearflame Engine Technologies in helping them diversify their talent pipeline and improve the diversity in DEI within their strategy overall. Lila is an employee benefits platform, and they actually partnered with Nannyist, which is a childcare, specifically a childcare platform that essentially onboarded within Lila. So they were able to ink a partnership there. And then Metric, Megan Murday, an amazing founder, actually focuses on capturing carbon emissions for companies, as well as improving the DEI within and the metrics within their companies. And she offered her services to the entire Venture Engine ecosystem. So here you get to see a little bit of what that connectivity looks like internally. So looking forward, very much in alignment with the points that Austin had made earlier within the UE index, one of the major things we want to do in 2023 is strengthen relationships with our Southern and Western Illinois universities and expand our reach regionally across community colleges, universities, and other ESOs in between, as well as economic opportunity zones and the organizations within those areas to essentially push more investment opportunities within overlooked areas. When it comes to investment support, we want to have a deeper discovery set of meetings with our corporates and VCs, just to make sure that we are doing what's best for their teams and providing the right types of startups and opportunities for them. And then, within that, increasing awareness around SBIRs and the STTI for our founders, because many times they understand the investment and capital side of things, but in many cases, there's so many government opportunities that can help them in their funding. Thirdly, we're implementing an entrepreneurship in residence program. This will be a monthly rotational program for our founders to essentially give them a different, thought leader each month that can give them a diversity of experience. And then lastly, we hope to increase the number of workshops and lunch and learns within our ecosystem and the partnerships with support organizations that can host those. We did some great outreach to our founders to kind of get a feel for what they are hoping for and what they'd like to see more of within our Venture Engine programming next year. And these were 2 of the more important things to them. So we're really looking forward to taking that to the next level. But thank you all so much. Really looking forward to collaborating more with you all here. And I will pass it off to, or I will bring Austin back up as we have our amazing panelists up for the amazing things that we've discussed here and breaking down how they're impacting this work as well.
And Toby, I just want to interject. Great job. I'm so happy to be working with you on Venture Engine. We've had a great pilot year, and I can't wait to see what we can do in 2023. And so, yes, looking forward to you and Austin moderating this wonderful panel discussion.
Thanks, Colleen. And to So our four panelists are from across the spectrum in Illinois, and they're all incredible. And I'm just going to give a brief introduction for each of them. Indu Rupasara is the co-founder, president, CEO of Fruit Vaccine Incorporated, where she oversees the business and research projects of the company and is the principal investigator directing the R&D efforts for their NSF-funded technology, the Fruit Vax pill. Abigail Ingram is the executive director of the Polsky Exchange on the south side of Chicago, supporting local business owners and entrepreneurs. Prior to her role at Polsky, she launched the Women in Entrepreneurship Institute at DePaul University and is a former entrepreneur herself. Dr. Irfan Ahmad serves as the executive director of the Health Maker Lab and is the assistant dean for research at the Carles Illinois College of Medicine. He is also the executive director for interdisciplinary initiatives for the Granger College of Engineering. His research interests involve bio-nanotechnology, nanomedicine, sensors, and precision agriculture. And then Alex Baram is the co-founder and CEO of Jupiter DX, a health data aggregation platform that helps patients with chronic illnesses manage their conditions. Jupiter DX aims to help patients, clinicians, and researchers better understand illnesses by consolidating information from electronic health records to wearable and dietary information. Alex is currently a senior at Northwestern University, where he studies economics. Thanks for joining us, everyone. So I just wanted to kind of start off, one of the big themes throughout the University Entrepreneurship Index and Venture Engine was the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so for our founders here, that's Indu and Alex, I wanted to ask you both, how have each of your organizations scaled during the pandemic, and what have been the barriers to success that each of you have encountered due to the pandemic or anything that's kind of related to the pandemic? Indu, we can go ahead and start with you.
Yeah, sure. So it has been a tough ride, like the whole COVID season for us, because we are a R&D company, research and development. So we cannot do remote or virtual, as you say, like full time, right? Like we have to do research. So there were so many adjustments we had to do during the pandemic season. Personally, like in the company wise, our co-founder passed away in late 2020, and then we ended 2021. That was a very emotional downer for me. I highly respect him. He was one of my mentors. And we entered 2021 with a NSF SBIR grant and having to start a brand new lab in the middle of the pandemic. So I'm very, very thankful to NSF for funding us like that. That was a huge strength we had. We applied to NIH, USDA, NIST, NIST, and all those, but only got funded with NSF. So it's a hard work, but it was worth it with NSF. Then it took 3 years for the lab to be ready for us to move in. 3 months. For the lab for us to be moved in, because we need certain requirements for a biotech lab. Everybody was facing pandemic, including our incubator. So it was tough ride for everybody. So then it took several months again, like to establish the lab, buy everything we needed, supplies and all that. And then we went through 3 NSF organized trainings and the boot camp, National ICO, and also the commercialization plan. I'm eternally thankful to NSF for everything they did. It's not just the funding they did; they trained us to a great extent to be ready. And with pandemic, like we had issues, but otherwise NSF did its job perfectly. So then towards the end of the year, we had again like funding issues, and starting this year was an extreme tough rider, roller coaster for us. Even though then with those challenges we did achieve as well. So we had to downgrade our lab couple of times, which was a huge issue for us as a R&D company. And then actually, I'm very happy that I got exposed to this year. I got exposed to this Chicago business ecosystem. I don't know how it happened, but I ended up getting invitations from WBC, Venture Engine, Matter, MHub, Think Chicago, and all those, and I ended up participating in many of those events as well. And I'm very happy about that and very thankful about that as well. And we ended up publishing a journal paper in Human Vaccines and Immunotherapeutics in September, which ended up getting a lot of invitations for me to talk in conferences. And I ended up already, with my time availability, giving invited talks in Polymers 2022, vaccines R&D in Boston. Polymers was in LA, vaccine R&D was in Boston, and also Future Labs in North Carolina within last 2 months. So it was a lot of traveling.
Awesome.
And also Think Chicago, I participated. We are a partner there as well. So that's our, all goods and bads. Yeah, tough, right? But yeah, we are moving
It's
forward.
good that all those conferences are still occurring and everything. And I wanted to move over with Alex. What were your experiences with the scaling a health related startup during the pandemic, and what was that like for you? And was recruiting a team difficult on campus with the impact of the pandemic? Can you run us through that?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Thrilled to be here. Yeah, you hit it right on the head. Jupiter was founded right at the height of, I guess, round 2 of the pandemic, late 2021, early 2022. And going through recruiting was definitely difficult as CDC guidance was shifting. People were trying to realize if being in person was safe, if staying virtual was a necessity. And going through that process was definitely difficult, especially with a lot of moving parts. I would say that one of the things we learned early on within this process is that we identified pretty quickly that starting in January of 22, there was going to be a lot of indecision surrounding what is industry standards. So we made the decision to say, okay, we're not going to go and be a in-person first company that shifts to remote when absolutely necessary. We decided to say, okay, we're going to be a remote company right out of the gate. And when we have the opportunity to be in person, we're going to take those opportunities. But really that mindset shift of saying, okay, we're going to build the infrastructure, we're going to build the team around this concept of we're staying remote. If we have the opportunity to be in person, which I think there's a ton of value in being when the circumstances are right, we're going to take it. But at the end of the day, just really working around the circumstances that COVID presented.
Yeah, I love that. And it's obviously extremely important as a founder to be able to segue and counter these new situations. And I think that's really interesting, the way of organizing a startup as being remote from the inception is really something that's innovative in its own right. And so Dr. Ahmad, Abigail, both of you work within the university support space. And I kind of wanted to talk to each of you about, in the founder support space. And I wanted to talk to you each about kind of what type of programs are occurring at Polsky and at the Health Maker Lab that promote diversity. One of the things that we saw within the University Entrepreneurship Report is that support staff have been able to make an impact here. There's been an increased representation of diverse founders, particularly women and immigrant founders is something that we've seen it play out in the data. And I kind of wanted to give you both an opportunity to promote one or two new or old programs that promote that diversity experience and entrepreneurial activity.
So should I go first then?
Yeah, sure, Dr. Ahmad, that'd be great.
Okay, good. Thank you, Colleen and Austin and Toby for hosting us and for the great job for the index that you presented. Great information for all of us. So, wearing the academic hat, we at the College of Medicine have been focused on, right from the get-go, on diversity and inclusion and equity. And so that transcended into the Health Maker Lab that we direct and work with, building on the great innovation ecosystem that the campus has, starting from the research park to the Office of Technology Management and all the nodes that we call it. We call it the $1 billion garage at the University of Illinois. So to capitalize on that, what we hold these two makeathons, one in fall and one in spring. The fall makeathons are uniquely set up that the Carl Illinois College of Medicine students lead these efforts in addressing clinical ideas. In this case, we just had one on December 3rd, where clinical ideas came from Carl and Mayo Clinic. And then they were partnered with engineering students and CS students and College of Business students, including Carl residents, but also community members. So each team had a community member, primarily from an underrepresented minority, to be part of that. And we have done this over the last 5 years, and this was our 5th annual makeathon. So that was huge. When we talked to these community members, they were so happy and impressed with the fact that they were sitting there with some of the top minds, but also being able to share their life experiences. Because sometimes people say that, oh, I don't have a degree behind my name and I don't know anything about medicine and so on and so forth. But what we are saying is that you have a knowledge base which none of us or none of the students would have, which is life experiences, and you have seen it and done it. And so this cross exchange of ideas actually is beneficial for the growth of also for innovation and for the training of the next generation workforce. So that's what we did for the fall makeathon. For the spring makeathons are open to all Illinois residents. And so that means that any number, both also from on-campus students and faculty and physicians and otherwise, but also the general community members. So we have had a great input from these members, and there are at least several ideas that have come about through these community members. And one or two of those ideas actually have transcended into a not-for-profit startup. And one of them is actually based in your neighborhood in Chicagoland, and very nicely done by a 8th grader along father-son team in working with stress environments and using classical music to do that. The other one is a miniature horsepower using brainwaves, and they have set up a horse farm, a miniature horse farm here in Urbana, and address the needs of anxiety and depression for younger children to interact with them as therapy animals and the like. And there are several others that we can talk about. So during the pandemic, we did have operating constraints because as you say, we went from in-person activities to virtual, which meant that to incorporate some of our communities which do not have access to so we start assuming that everybody has an internet connectivity, is savvy about the Zooms and the like. So those were the challenges that we had to navigate with those who did not have the background or the accessibility or the bandwidth to be engaged in that. And that was a challenge and continues to be a challenge.
Thank you so much for that, Irfan. One of the things you mentioned earlier was more of that regional perspective. And Abigail, to you, having been in Chicago, we'd love to know a bit more about some of the things you're working on at Polsky and how that relates to the conversation around diversity as well.
Yeah, so wonderful to be here with you all this morning. I run the Polsky Exchange, which houses the community-facing entrepreneurship and innovation initiatives at the University of Chicago. And we serve the 9 neighborhoods around Hyde Park. So translating university resources and knowledge for the benefit of growing local businesses is really the heart of my work. Just as important is improving the university through engagement with our community. So we have 2 programs that launch in January, to be program specific, that involve booth students providing technical assistance to local businesses. One of those is for specific scope of work consulting projects. One of them is for financial reporting and projections. These programs are incredibly powerful for founders who are getting just excellent business school access and education. It's also wonderful for our students, because they're getting a different view of entrepreneurship. A lot of times we have MBA students who are interested in PE and VC, and those are wonderful fields to go into. There are a lot of ways to be an entrepreneur, however, and so this provides the opportunity for students to expand their horizons in terms of thinking about what entrepreneurship and innovation can mean. On a specific STEM initiative, just a few weeks ago, Deep Tech Ventures launched out of the Polsky Center. That's led by my good friend Dan Sachs. And quantum computing and data science are the first two verticals, but with other deep tech verticals to follow. Even within those deep tech programs, we're guided by what we call inclusive innovation. This is a University of Chicago-wide priority. So it means that we're intentional about both making the tools for innovation and the pathways to scale for those companies available to diverse populations.
Thank you so much, Abigail. Obviously, that's something that I'm hoping more and more organizations can continue to build upon. And it kind of goes straight into the next question, which is specifically for Indu in this case, being one of our venture engine founders. As you may have seen on the report, 41% of our startups are minority founded and come from backgrounds, obviously across a range of different demographics. However, we do know, as Abigail mentioned, that more work can be done. For you, Indu, as a minority founder in this space, what have been some of the different organizations and opportunities that you have leveraged that have allowed you as a diverse founder to break down certain barriers and enter certain spaces?
Yeah, thank you, Toby. You have been very, very active in reminding me on a lot of things. I'm very thankful to you, Toby, about that, with a lot of invitations and all that stuff. You have been very active this year. So as I'm actually minority founder and a woman founder, right? So I belong under both those categories. Opportunity-wise, like these kind of initiatives, like venture engine, kind of like what you all are doing has been very helpful for me, like to get exposure. Exposure is always needed, like for startups, right? And I'm like, we started as we started, we are getting more and more exposure, especially this year. I'm very happy with the exposure we are getting. The exposure to the Chicago business, we are from Champaign, right? Like we are a small town here. And that was a great start for us. Like we are like under the university umbrella, even though we are an independent company, we are in the incubator. And then getting exposed to the Chicago business ecosystem made me get to know a lot of y'all and also network. And I pitched at Venture Engine, right? Like in life sciences in the summer or early summer this year. And also for our NIST application, Colleen gave me a support letter through that, getting to know network thing. So that's a wonderful exposure for me. And also after our journal publication in September, I'm getting a lot of invitations to talk outside the state also. So I went to LA and Boston, North Carolina, and all those places also like for invited talks. So that we are just getting started, as I see. It's a hard ride, very tough ride, especially with the COVID stuff and our co-founder passing away. I had to take a lot of responsibilities. We are a teeny team. Startups are always having hard time. And the bottleneck always is funding. So all the challenges we faced are because of funding, lack of funding. Even the downgrade of our labs were because we were not having funding. So that was a humongous hit. So those kind of issues, if funding support is given for our kind of startups, it's going to be a huge, huge support. That's why I'm so extremely thankful to NSF for what they have done for us so far.
Thanks, Indu. I just wanted to dive back into something that Abigail mentioned with scaling and improving representation for underrepresented founders. That there is data in our UE index that suggests that not only is there more diverse founders than ever before in our university systems, but that these founders are more likely to attract funding, they're more likely to stay active, and they're more likely to create jobs from that funding. They are about 5% more likely than the general population to attract that funding. And so this is a huge win and something that we've been improving upon in recent years. And I wanted to give Abigail a chance. Is this a reflection of efforts at universities across the state of Illinois? Obviously, at the University of Chicago, those efforts are underway, but is there more that we can do throughout the state to improve representation?
Always. Always. So I'm trying to decide which piece of your question to start with because it's complicated. There is much more intentionality, I will say, in all of the conversations I have within the University of Chicago that I had when I was at DePaul, and with every one of our university partners. Absolutely. It's well noted that we have this incredible business case for why diverse founders and why women founders should get investment. For women founders specifically, the ROI tends to be higher and the exit tends to be quicker. So the arguments aren't difficult to make. It's simply about access to that opportunity. So I can say confidently at the University of Chicago, using a lens that that is informed, it's part of our daily conversations here. And I would imagine in the offices of my colleagues at other institutions. As far as what more we can do, I mean, founders need time and they need money. So as much of that space we can create for people to be able to do what they do. For us specifically at the Polsky Exchange, we talk a lot about the back office functions because whether you're a tech founder or a non-tech founder, a lot of your time is going to be spent doing business tasks that aren't necessarily within your area of expertise. So I think a lot of institutions, the University of Chicago included, are thinking through what are the wraparound supports we can provide so that founders have the opportunity to be good at what they do, so that we can let them shine in their area of expertise and maybe do a little less accounting.
Totally fair. I'm sure that's something that a lot of startup founders can identify with. But Dr. Ahmad, is that an experience that founders in the downstate region, you're at Urbana, is there a difference there, do you think, between founders in Chicago versus founders downstate? Are the tools that are available to founders at, say, Urbana-Champaign or where I am in Springfield, are the tools that are available to those founders, are they being are they accessible for diverse founders and are they accessible to underrepresented groups? Are you seeing like a change there?
Yeah, so this is a slow change. Of course, besides the investment capital that Chicago has or other states may have. I mean, I'm not sure if Laura is still online, but she can comment on that part. But in terms of the diverse groups, there's always a challenge because when somebody is not associated with the university, to give them access to resources and to have them use the resources is a challenge, although it fits into our directly into the land grant mission of the University of Illinois. But these systems are being set up as we speak. We have actually my colleague, the Carolina College of Medicine, Ruby Mendenhall, who is Associate Dean for Diversity and Democratization of Health Innovation. So we have right from the get-go, a targeted person, a go-to person who would encourage these participations. And as I mentioned, these two examples earlier, and there are several others that have both coming from not only underrepresented minorities, but also women and other folks that we would not be cast in the net that we generally have. So yes, but comparing Chicago with Urbana-Champaign would be different because Chicago has a lot of other offerings that Indu was mentioning about, and that's why we would need a fast train between Urbana-Champaign and Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely.
I totally agree with you. totally agree with you.
And
Yeah, so
speaking of that fast train,
so let me add this. So the University of Illinois and especially President Killeen actually has set up the daily bus service for faculty and students for collaboration, going to UIC and other parts and day-long trips and so on and so forth. So that's exactly to facilitate those kind of interactions.
Well, facilitating that dialogue between the downstate and Chicago is definitely something that I think can be an area of improvement for the state overall. And Alex, you're in Chicago there. You're at Northwestern. You're a senior there. I kind of wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about your experience with university support staff. Dr. Ahmad and Abigail both work in this space of supporting founders, both in Chicago and the downstate. Alex, what has your experience been working with Northwestern support staff, and what kind of takeaways have you garnered from your experience in working with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had the opportunity to be pretty heavily engaged with the Garage at Northwestern, which is one of the major entrepreneurial hubs over there. And I really can't speak highly enough about the team over there. Mike Rabb, Elisa Mitchell, Carly Kramer, Jake Jiraka, and the rest of the team over there have all made it a place that students can really feel comfortable exploring new ideas, getting involved in the startup community. And I think, as Abigail had alluded to a little bit previously, like taking some of those back office functions and being able to put founders where they're wanting to spend their time. Yeah, can wholeheartedly say that we wouldn't be where we're at today without that level of support. And beyond the direct interactions of the Garage, the alumni community has been extremely, extremely helpful. People have reached out to us offering to help, and every time we've had any interest in talking to somebody, we've reached out to them, and they've all been extremely supportive of talking with us and helping us along the way.
And Alex, just a quick follow-up there. As you saw within Venture Engine, one of the cool points of emphasis that we captured was that 85% of our founders had actually mentioned that corporate connectivity was something on their, higher on their list of priority. And as you're, getting into that fundraising scale, you're venturing out even deeper into the waters of this journey. How does some of that play into your roadway moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I think operating within healthcare provides a unique opportunity where you need to be involved with multiple stakeholders. So we're running a primarily direct to consumer focused health app, but involving clinicians and talking with pharmaceutical companies or academic research centers or hospitals have been really, really important. And any support that startup founders, especially at the college stage, could get to have access and get into those rooms, I think really open a ton of doors, especially at this stage.
Dr. Ahmad, this is a bit of a changing conversation a bit. So kind of jumping back to something that Indu mentioned, the importance of funding and fundraising, especially for some of these biomedical startups and that are kind of cost intensive whenever they're first starting. What is, can you kind of detail for us there in the University Entrepreneurship Report, we reported that $655 million was generated by university supported startups in the biomedical field over the last 5 academic years. That $655 million, where does it go? Where do biomedical startups kind of use that money for? And kind of what are can you detail some of the ways that biomedical startups utilize follow-on funding from external sources?
So yeah, so again, as I said, Laura Panzeller would be the best person to respond to that. But generally, my understanding, it goes to both in terms of getting their clinical trials, the setting up the trials, and also through the FDA approval processes and the like, and also for the device testing and hiring of folks who have done this, because as a startup you may not have all the know-how for translating that into a product or device, and so that itself takes the time and resources, and that's where it goes. And then also to be able to present, as Indu's example is a poster example for that you're based here, but then you have to go and do fundraising in Chicago or in the Silicon Valley or wherever your device is, or go to Boston area or Cambridge to do that. And so that's where it happens, and that's where the funds go. But clinical trials, the devices, access to the labs itself, although accessing university labs is, especially at Illinois, is not too prohibitive, cost prohibitive. So they're open to industry members. They can also become part of STTRs and the like, and be able to leverage those labs. So those are other examples that it would go. Of course, the hiring of the key people, the CEOs and the like. And the research park also provides entrepreneur in residence. Some of those folks have actually done these biomedical device startups and the like. So they also help them out. But then some of them have to be compensated accordingly. I hope I was able to answer some of it.
Yeah, that was great, Dr. Ahmad. Appreciate it. And we've talked about the relationship building that can occur between Chicago and the downstate, and some of the relationship building that has to occur for founders in order to attract that funding. And Abigail, I do have a question for you about the venture capital scene in Chicago. There's rumors out there that the venture capital scene in Chicago is a little bit more risk averse. They're not as interested in funding some of these some startups that are a little bit more of a risky venture. And Alex, you may be able to comment on this as well, but Abigail, I wanted to give you a chance to kind of speak on the venture capital scene and what you've seen working around in that space.
I hear a different story from different founders and from folks who are in VC versus those outside of it. So what I can tell you is that I've had many meetings with people who are investing, and I'll give an example. Drive Capital, which is Midwest based, they're doing $500,000 investments for back of the napkin stage businesses. So it's certainly the fact that Chicago does not have a stellar historical reputation in this space means that a lot of investors are stepping up to fill the gaps. And there's also a lot of unique ways to capitalize businesses that don't fall under the VC umbrella. So I'm thinking of revenue-based financing. I'm thinking of lending based on having a contract in hand, which our friends at LISC do. There's a lot more options that are coming up for founders. I still meet with founders who say, I tried in Chicago and I had to go to the coasts. It still happens. I mean, I think we can be honest about the fact that just by sheer concentration or industry dependent, there are some very narrowly constructed businesses that go to very narrowly constructed investors. And that is more a function of industry than it is a function of geography. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, Austin. It's kind of like the typical lawyer answer. It depends on really who you're speaking to and what kind of funding it is that you're seeking.
That was great. And Alex, I'm kind of curious, are you noticing any changes within the VC scene there as you're currently attempting to attract some of that seed funding? What does that look like for you? Where are you exploring, and kind of, can you run us through that process as a founder?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would echo the sentiments of Abigail and though I'm not a lawyer, give the lawyer answer of it depends. I definitely think historically Chicago has had the reputation of being a little bit more quote unquote risk averse, though I'm not necessarily sure that even from a founder standpoint, that is a bad thing. I think going in and really having strong fundamentals as a business and what some of these more traditional Chicago-based VCs are looking for is something that actually does favors to the founders as well, and being a little bit more diligent in that process of saying, all right, okay, this is where we have a path to profitability. We're not just going to focus on growth for the next 15 years and burn through cash and need to just focus on raising our next fundraising round in order to stay default alive. But yeah, I would say Abigail had mentioned Drive Capital and a couple of other funds in the area that's really starting to, I guess, change that dynamic in Chicago. And yeah, having been on calls with people in Chicago and the coast, I'm starting to see a bit of a convergence in terms of the attitudes, with the coasts becoming a little bit more risk averse, Chicago becoming a little bit more open to early stage ideas.
Thank you for that, Alex. And on that same topic, Indu, I'd love to get your perspective as well, right? Because one of the organizations that you've mentioned quite a couple times today is the NSF, right? And how a lot of that federal funding has supported you on your journey. But now, having been more involved in the Chicagoland and a bit more of those like VC and corporate engagements, what does that shift in perspective look like for you, right? What is going from more federal funding through these types of like grants look like and switching over now a bit more to VC and corporate funding?
Thanks, Kobe. Toby, yeah, I think I got exposed to the Chicago business ecosystem this year, and I'm still learning. Like, there are so many societies, organizations, like I'm still learning which they are, kind of, while participating and networking with all of your organizations like WBC, Venture Engine, Matter, MHub, Think Chicago. And also, by the way, Abigail, I was in Polsky for the Think Chicago mini conference a couple of weeks ago. I really liked your institution. And yeah, so that exposure, I'm just getting started with, kind of. So that's a great exposure. So NSF, as I told you, I'm eternally thankful too. And I met like our NSF director in one of the conferences I went to for the invited talks in North Carolina. And this exposure, I think, very soon will get us into more funding, like this exposure to Chicago, which I see as a like business hub in Illinois. Chicago, of course, like it's a big city. So I truly hope like that will be like really a very fruitful ending for us. We are an R&D company, right? So a return of investment is long. We are a vaccine developer. So a lot of investors have high hesitancy there. And we know that. So that is why we need like very unique investors who have patience to work with us. You know what I mean? So it's not like we don't have sales, we don't have revenue. So like it's kind of like a tough game with investors for us, very tough game. So and hopefully we'll find the right kind of investor who will work with us and take us, let us make us stand up. We are an infant in vaccine industry. We are like about 5-year-old company, which is an infant in vaccine industry compared with Pfizer, all those like elephants. Like, we are an ant in the vaccine industry right now. But we will move forward, so that's where we need a lot of support. And it's a very high cost industry.
Yeah.
High cost, high return, but you have to especially think about the cost before we get the return. So we are a very unique industry that way, especially in the Midwest. Vaccine is not the Midwest industry in general. So that's why we have kind of like tough ride, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
We are still active.
Well, thank you for that perspective too, right? Because being able to see Alex's perspective, Abigail, Irfan as well, and kind of the difference, you're all in different places in this ecosystem. So it's really cool to see the interesting perspectives there. I'll hand it off to Austin for our final question, so that we can close out this amazing event that we've had today.
Yeah, I'm gonna close with a question to Alex, and I appreciate each of our panelists so much, but this is a question that's particular to the future and looking at founders that are 5, 10, 15 years that are away from founding a startup and are young entrepreneurs that are within high schools or freshmen and sophomores in college. Indu mentioned that there's currently transitions coming from Urbana-Champaign and up to Chicago. Dr. Ahmad mentioned that a lot of students are exploring those pathways to entrepreneurship already. Alex, what kind of advice do you have for a freshman at Northwestern that's interested in starting their own business, and what's the kind of best piece of advice you can offer them?
Yeah, if I could give a piece of advice to anybody really at any age that's looking to get into entrepreneurship, it's twofold, I would say. First part being, the only way to find out what you like is by doing it. You can think about what you might like all that you want, but you're really not going to know if you like it, if you really enjoy it, if it's the thing that gives that spark in your eye until you're in the mud every day and really just experiencing it. As an extension of that, I would say showing up is probably 90% of the battle. A lot of people are really averse and a little bit not willing to make that jump into entrepreneurship. But I think at whatever degree of risk you're comfortable doing, just getting involved, cold emailing that person that you're thinking like, oh, what they're doing is cool, and really just staying involved in the ecosystem and taking a more active role in what you want to do. I can't tell you how many opportunities have come up for us just by me cold emailing somebody saying, hey, this is like what you're doing is really interesting to me. I'd love to pick your brain and talk about it. And then I think the final piece of advice would be, this is supposed to be hard. There's going to be days where you feel like you're hitting a wall. There might be weeks where you feel like you're hitting a wall, but it's normal. It's all part of the process. And I think that's part of the beauty of entrepreneurship and startups, that because that's already baked in, there's really only upside from there. On the days that it's easy, that's just sprinkles on top.
Indu, I'm gonna ask you the same question. Do you have a piece of advice for startup founders, and for those that are already in the mud, or maybe for some of those that are looking forward to maybe in the future getting into the mud?
Sure, Austin. One thing I must tell you is like persistence. You must expect risks. You must be a risk taker if you have to be an entrepreneur and like a startup founder. Most of the risks are unexpected. You think, oh, things are working. I did apply for this, that, all those things, and I gave so many pitches. You most of the time hear no's. Don't get discouraged. A lot of people say no. No is like a very common answer to a founder. And, you know, a lot of challenges, a lot of people put you down because you have no funding and stuff like that. But like, keep moving. That's my best advice to founders, and know what you are getting into before you get started. If you can. I didn't know what I was getting into, but if you know that there will be a lot of risks and a lot of challenges, and if you have the will, you will get there. Be persistent.
And in a, you know, Dr. Ahmad and Abigail, you both oversee a lot of different founders on a day-to-day basis. What are some of the sentiments that you would like to leave with founders and even leaders, right, that are also assisting these founders on a day-to-day basis as well? I'll start with, yeah, you can go ahead, Dr.
Okay.
And I'll end.
Yeah, so thanks. So, you know, we are at especially when I'm looking at the College of Medicine, so we are a college in infancy. So we just are graduating our first class last year, just in May. And so there's not a whole lot of founders coming through, but the message that we have given to our students and other potential founders is just, as Indu was saying, just go ahead and do it. And Alex also mentioning it, that, yeah, but you also have to know that what are you passionate about? And if you are passionate about, then you have to also find the time, because time is an issue, especially for students coming from professional colleges, such as the College of Medicine or similar others. And how would you address that? And then we have seen examples of those who have actually taken the time within this constraint to go out and found a company, and also seeking other financial resources and the like, and are there. And so it's really very inspiring to do that. And so our message is that just dream it and do it. So whatever you can dream it, you can do it. And so because this college is training physician innovators, so it's right from the get-go is being built into them that innovation is the pathway. You are going to be physician innovators. So you have to, so to speak, practice innovation, know innovation, what it is, and then go about doing it. So, and on a larger scale, of course, I mean, my colleague, again, Laura, is online. So she has the deeper perspectives, because she sees others beyond the biomedical space, but also biomedical space at the research park and enterprise work. So,
well, thank you so much, Dr. Ahmad. And Abigail?
I'll quickly highlight something that Indu said. I think probably, Indu, you could have done your research and known what you were getting into. And I'm grateful that you acted before you knew how hard it was going to be. And I sort of wonder if there's something to that. Like maybe jumping into it without knowing how difficult gives us the audacity to just do it, which I think is kind of a beautiful thing. Overall, I would say that entrepreneurship is the most powerful mechanism that I have seen for economic mobility and empowerment. And so we have a responsibility to make sure that it's a path that all of us can access.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Abigail, and to the entire panel. Thank you so much for your amazing time this afternoon. Thank you to all of our attendees who came through. Many of you have been very instrumental in us putting this data together, and we're so grateful for all the work that you do across this ecosystem. We will be sending out both the report for the UE index to you all shortly after this call, so be on the lookout for that. But until then, be on the lookout for our STEM talent pipeline coming next year. I hope you all have a great holiday season and have a great rest of your day.